For number 19, what we need to do is we need to consider first we need to get one side equal to 0. So in order to do that, I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. And I'm also going to subtract 4 from both sides. Notice what I want to do to one side, I have to do to the other. I also have lined up my like terms on the left so I can add them easily. On the right side, that's equal to 0, but let's combine like terms on the left. So we get 2x squared minus 6x minus 8. That's step 1. Step 2, we need to factor. Let's look for a GCF first. That will always make our life easier if we find one. And sure enough, 2 is a GCF. When we divide a 2 out, we're left with x squared minus 3x minus 4. So let's use product sum on that part. The product is 1 times negative 4, so it's negative 4. And the sum is going to be negative 3 because that's the b. And so negative 4 and 1 multiply to negative 4 and add negative 3. So that's going to be how we're going to split up negative 3x. We split up negative 3x, find the GCF of the first two, which is x. Find the GCF of the second two, which just happens to be 1. And we get 2 times x minus 4 times x plus 1 equals 0. So we actually have 3 factors to consider here. We have 2, we have x minus 4, and we have x plus 1. Some people like to skip over the first one, and I like to always remember to consider it, and I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, can 2 ever be equal to 0? No. So that is a dead end. But you always want to consider all the factors because if there was an x out in front, that would be another solution. There's not an x, and so there's no solution out there. So I'm going to cross that off and keep moving. X minus 4, let's set that equal to 0. That's the next factor. And when we solve for x, we get x equals 4. For the last factor, x plus 1 equals 0, let's subtract 1 from both sides, and we get x equals negative 1. So our two solutions are x equals 4 and x equals negative 1. And you have to list both of those in order to get full credit. For number 20, we already have step 1 done. It's already equal to 0. I always want to check the GCF first, and here this is very important because I found that x is a GCF. What's left behind is x squared minus 9, and the observant student sees, oh, that is a difference of squares. That's going to make our life much simpler when you can recognize difference of squares. So let's follow through with that. We write 2 sets of parentheses. We have addition and subtraction. The square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 9 is 3. And so we get those 3 factors. So let's set each one equal to 0. Well, the first one, x equals 0, is a solution. So here, we don't have to add or subtract anything. We already have the solution. X equals 0 is one of the solutions. Do you see why I want you to always consider all the parts? For the next factor, x plus 3 equals 0, we're going to solve for x by subtracting 3 on both sides, and we get x equals negative 3. For the third one, x minus 3 equals 0, we're going to add 3 to both sides, so x equals positive 3. And those are our 3 solutions. X equals 0, x equals negative 3, and x equals positive 3. Just as a reminder, you can plug these solutions back into the original equation to check for whether you got them correct or not. All right, moving on. Number 21. A Civil War battalion wanted to make a fort alongside a mountain. For all their equipment and supplies, they needed 600 square feet along the side of the mountain. The variable is x in feet. X is in feet. So, you see our diagram here. There's no fence along the cliff, but you have 1, 2, 3 sides, and we want to write an equation that represents area. So, the 600 square feet is very important because that 600 square feet is the area. Area is length times width, so I'm going to write 600 for area, and length and width, it doesn't matter which is which, you can have this in any order, but that's the x and the 50 minus x, length and width. So let's write down x times 50 minus x. There is our equation. That's part A. For part B, to solve the equation for the possible values of x using factoring, we need to multiply it out first and get one side equal to 0. So let's multiply it out. 50x minus x squared is on the right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move things from the right side to the left side. But instead of moving them, remember we have to do the same thing to both sides. So I'm going to subtract 50x from both sides. And I'm going to add x squared to both sides. The reason I'm doing this is because it's always a little bit nicer to have your x squared term, the coefficient of that, be positive. It just makes things work out a little bit nicer. I could move everything to the right side instead, but this just simplifies it a little bit. So we get x squared minus 50x plus 600 equals 0. Here I'm going to do product sum, and this is another place where if you get stuck on this, if you can write down the product, 1 times 600, and write down the sum, negative 50, and you ask me about this on the test, because you can't find the two numbers that multiply to 600 and add to negative 50, as long as you can get to this point, I can nudge you in the right direction for some points and give you and show you what the product sum is. So if you go through and check, you'll find that negative 20 and negative 30 are the two numbers that multiply to 600 and add to negative 50. So here we go. Those two add up to negative 50. So I'm going to split up negative 50 into that. X squared minus 20x minus 30x plus 600 equals 0. Then we're going to factor, and I'm running out of room here. You need to get GCF. Negative 30 is the GCF of the second two. Move this up here. So x minus 20 times x minus 30. That's step 2. We factored. Now we have to find baby equations. So x minus 20 equals 0 and x minus 30 equals 0. Solve for each of those and you get x equals 20 and x equals 30. So x could be 20 or 30 feet. Last question, which of the options would require the battalion to have the smallest perimeter when closed the 600 feet? Well, smallest perimeter, that's adding up all the sides. Let's plug in 20 and 30 for x into the diagram and see which has the smaller sides. Well, when I plug in 20, I get 20 on the sides, and 50 minus 20 is 30. So I get 20, 30, and 20 as the three sides. If I try to plug in 30 for x, I get 30 on either side, and on the bottom, I get 50 minus 30, which is 20. So the perimeter of the first one, when you're plugging in 20, when x is 20, you get 20, 20, and 30, which adds up to 70 feet. And for the second one, when you plug in 30 for x, you get 30, 30, and 20, which means that that perimeter is 80. So the first one, when x is 20, has the smaller perimeter. For the last one, you want to build a chicken coop in the backyard. The diagram of what you want to build is shown. This is, for example, an overhead view of the chicken coop. Well, we want to write an expression in standard form for the floor area. Fortunately, they gave us length and width of two different rectangles. Actually, one of them is a square. And so we're just going to multiply them together. So for the first one, we're going to multiply them together because it's area, and then we need to add them all together to put it in standard form. So x plus 5 times 3x plus 4, that's going to be the big rectangle. And the small rectangle is going to be 2x minus 1 times 2x minus 1. So let's get multiplying. I'm going to just distribute the x plus 5, distribute each individual part, and combine like terms. 3x squared plus 19x plus 20 is the larger rectangle. For the smaller one, or the square, distribute 2x minus 1, then distribute each of the parts, combine like terms, and you get 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. So, to write the expression in standard form, we need to combine like terms. 7x squared is when you add 3x squared and 4x squared. When you add 19x and negative 4x, you get 15x. And when you add 20 and 1, you get 21. Check, check. So, that is the expression in standard form. If x equals 5, what's the area of the chicken coop? Well, let's just plug in 5 in for x. When you do that, you can type all of that into a calculator, which is how I would recommend doing that, and you get 121 square feet. Lastly, you can cover the floor of the chicken coop with straw for 72 cents or $0.72 per square foot. How much would it cost to cover the entire chicken coop with straw? Well, that's per square foot. So I'm going to take the number of square feet and I'm going to multiply that by the 0.72 and you get $87.12. And there's our last answer. Thank you very much for watching.